I stood at the bottom of the marble steps outside the Elmsworth, a towering monument of glass and stone I had built from scratch, now being guarded quite literally by my sister Elise in 4-inch designer heels. She stood firm at the entrance, like she owned the place, arms crossed, chin tilted, the kind of posture that screams entitlement. "You are not seriously thinking of walking in there?" She sneered, eyes sweeping over my black silk dress with performative disdain. It was a custom piece from a Parisian atelier, subtle, elegant, and worth more than her last 2 mortgage payments combined. But of course, Elise had no idea. To her, I was still the dropout, the black sheep, who had walked away from our family's safe little tax consultancy firm to chase a hotel fantasy. I never corrected her. I let them all believe I was folding towels and bussing tables in some nameless lobby. Meanwhile, I was signing contracts worth millions, curating penthouse experiences for royalty and CEOs, building an empire under their noses. As Elise mocked my appearance and my worth, I stayed silent. The irony burned deeper than her insults. The Elmsworth, this exact hotel, was mine. My team designed it, my signature crowned every floor plan. And yet, here I was, being told I could not enter my own building because I might embarrass the family. My mother soon joined, her eyes cold and mouth set in that familiar line of disapproval. "Kennedy, please," she said quietly but firmly. "This is for family and distinguished guests. Let's not make a scene." For a brief moment, I considered turning away. Let them have their illusions. But something within me, maybe the years of silence, maybe the years of quiet building, rose to the surface. I looked up at the Elmsworth's glittering facade, every window reflecting my journey, not theirs. And I knew in that instant tonight was no longer about a birthday. It was about truth. I straightened my shoulders, gripped the envelope in my clutch, and took a step forward. The air was colder near the doors, or maybe that was just the chill of my sister's voice. "You cannot come in, Kennedy," Elise said, her tone firm and saccharine, the kind that masks venom with etiquette. "This is the VIP floor. It's for family and distinguished guests only." Her words lingered like perfume, expensive, artificial, suffocating. I raised an eyebrow, glanced at the gold-accented doors behind her. My doors. My mind drifted back to the previous outline, when I stood at those steps, wearing the silk they mocked, holding the envelope they belittled. I had expected resistance, yes, but nothing this blatant. Elise's voice was now joined by our mother's, quiet but sharp. "Kennedy, this is not the time to make a scene. We talked about this." No, they talked. I received a single text that morning: "Do not come. It's too formal. We only want people who reflect well on the family." It was a message disguised as concern, but reeking of judgment. Elise smirked, adjusting her knockoff clutch like it was a badge of superiority. "Let me guess. A gift card for Dad, Olive Garden. Something from the bargain rack." I smiled slightly, already imagining the look on their faces when they would later realize the truth. The envelope in my hand did not contain a coupon or clearance trinket. It held the deed to a villa overlooking the Tuscan countryside, a property that had been off the market for years, now part of the Del Haven Signature Collection. The same collection Elise had tried and failed to book last summer. She glanced at me now like I was still the 24-year-old who left the family business with nothing but ambition and a worn-out suitcase. But I was no longer that girl. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to lift you up, comment yes below, and subscribe to this channel. Because this story, my story, is not over. Charles appeared next, fresh off a promotion. He could barely spell smug in a suit he did not quite fill out. "Kennedy, what are you doing here?" he asked, confused. "Shouldn't you be working?" The way he said it, flat, transactional, like I was a background extra in my own family, ignited something in me. What none of them knew yet was that I had spent the morning in a boardroom finalizing the acquisition of Charles's bank. I was not just working. I was writing the script they would soon be forced to read. James stepped through the glass doors, just as Elise prepared to deliver another insult, her mouth poised like a weapon. He moved with the quiet precision of someone who understood the weight of moments, his voice calm and unmistakably formal. "Madam CEO, your usual table is ready. Chef Henri delayed the tasting menu for your final approval. Silence. Thick, breathless, absolute. Elise's laughter died mid-exhale. Charles blinked as if trying to place the man addressing me. My mother's grip on her pearl necklace tightened her knuckles, white against the gold-plated handle. I turned slowly, giving them a moment to catch up, not just to the situation, but to the years of misunderstanding, of dismissal, of calculated silence. Perfect timing, James. What I said smoothly, stepping forward. They were just explaining why I wasn't qualified to dine in my own hotel. The sentence landed like glass on marble, polished, intentional, shattering everything beneath the surface. James nodded once professionally. Of course, ma'am. Miss Stone is the CEO and founder of the Del Haven Hospitality Group. She owns the Elmsworth and its entire chain across 3 countries, along with multiple luxury dining brands. Elise's clutch slipped from her wrist and clattered to the marble floor. Charles opened his mouth, closed it, then fumbled through his phone like reality might make more sense on screen. That's not possible, my mother whispered, voice thin and disbelieving. The Elmsworth is worth billions. I turned toward her, my tone gentle but firm. Which makes your comments about me not affording the tasting menu almost adorable. I took a step forward, my heels clicking across the floors I had chosen beneath chandeliers I had commissioned, past walls hung with art I had curated in Paris. Everything here had my fingerprints, even if my family had never cared to look close enough. The lobby staff straightened at the sight of me. Some smiled softly, others offered small nods of acknowledgement. Good evening, Miss Stone. Lena, at the front desk, said, her tone warm. The executive suite is ready for tonight's celebration. I glanced over my shoulder at Elise, Charles, and my mother still frozen at the entrance, as if walking through the threshold would force them to rewrite their version of who I had become. Coming, I asked not out of invitation, but assertion. It was time they stepped into my world. Or stood aside. The celebration was already underway by the time we stepped into the private lounge, my lounge on the top floor of the Elmsworth. Candlelight glimmered against imported glass, soft jazz played under a crystal chandelier I had commissioned from Venice, and every detail from the vintage silverware to the custom floral centerpieces had passed through my hands before passing any budget approval. This wasn't just a party. It was a manifestation of years of vision built in silence, while the very people now sipping champagne behind me assumed I was folding napkins somewhere out of sight. My father stood at the head of the table, half rising from his chair with confusion etched into every line of his face. Kennedy, he asked, what are you doing here? His voice carried a tinge of embarrassment, as if I were the distant cousin who showed up uninvited. I smiled and walked toward him, slowly, heels clicking across the floor that bore my name in stone contracts. Your wife said I couldn't afford to attend, I said calmly, reaching into my clutch and pulling out the white envelope Elise had scoffed at earlier. But I came anyway. Happy birthday, Dad. He took the envelope, eyebrows furrowed. Before he could open it, a voice rose behind us. Grayson, the regional director of one of the banks, negotiating a 7-figure deal with my holding company. Wait, Kennedy Stone, he said, stunned. Miss Stone owns the Elmsworth. Murmurs rippled across the room like a breaking tide. Thomas Fairchild, a partner from a law firm renting space in my commercial tower, nearly dropped his glass. Your daughter is the Kennedy Stone, he asked my father, disbelief widening his eyes. The one quietly buying half the city. My father's expression collapsed into something pale and speechless. Across the room, Elise lowered herself into a chair, face flushed, while Charles busied himself furiously, texting under the table, likely damage control. My mother stood as still as marble, her posture beginning to crack beneath the weight of a truth too large to ignore. I kept my head down. I said to no one in particular, and built everything you said I couldn't. And just like that, the hierarchy of the room shifted. Every eye that once looked past me now followed me with interest, some with awe, some with shame, but all of them finally seeing. I stepped out onto the terrace for air, but he was already there, my father standing in the shadow of the skyline, his back to me, hands clasped behind him, like he was trying to hold the evening together. The breeze carried the scent of wine and candle wax soft music, filtering through the glass doors behind us. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared out over the city. Then he pointed slowly to a cluster of buildings lit up against the night. How many of those do you own? His voice was quieter than I remembered, less certain, stripped of the authority he once used like armor. I joined him at the railing, watching headlights weave between skyscrapers. Enough, I said evenly, including the one housing the family firm. He nodded slowly, digesting it like a bitter pill. I was wrong about you, Kennedy. So terribly wrong. His voice cracked with a weariness that made me wonder if this moment, this reckoning, was more painful than he expected. I did not rush to fill the silence. Let it sit. Let it sting. Can you ever forgive us? He finally asked, turning to look at me fully. I met his gaze, unflinching. Forgiveness was never the problem, I said. Respect was. I paused, letting the truth settle in the space between us like fog. You did not respect my choices. Not when I left. Not when I worked in silence. Not even tonight, until someone with a business card told you I was worth listening to. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand gently. You taught me something, though, what it feels like to build alone, to rise without applause, and how to survive when love comes with conditions. Behind us, I could hear laughter, the low hum of conversations shifting now that they knew who I was. Funny how quickly people recalibrate their tone once they can add your name to their portfolios. Now, I added, glancing back toward the ballroom, you can go back inside and tell your friends your daughter owns the Elmsworth. That should give you something to talk about at your next dinner party. I did not wait for a reply. I left him standing there with his regrets and city lights while I returned to the world I had built, not for their approval, but in spite of it. ChatGPT Jane Noy. As I walked back into the lounge, the room no longer felt like a celebration, it felt like a revelation. The conversations had shifted. Guests who had once offered me nothing more than a polite nod at family functions were now hanging onto my every word, pretending they had known all along. The Blackwoods, once aloof with legacy pride, practically begged for a second chance at that resort membership I had quietly denied last quarter. Mr. Grayson lingered nearby, eager to revisit his bank's pending loan proposal, his earlier dismissiveness scrubbed clean by realization. It was astonishing how quickly the currency of respect changed hands when power entered the room with a familiar face. I watched from a distance as my mother flitted between clusters of guests, wiping the corners of her eyes, while loudly proclaiming she had always believed in Kennedy's potential. If it had not been so tragic, it would have been almost laughable. Elise sat slumped near the wine bar, nursing a glass she had not touched, her fiancé nowhere to be found. Rumor had it, he left moments after overhearing a conversation about her firm's lease renewal being at the mercy of mine. Charles paced by the dessert table, phone in hand, likely refreshing his inbox in desperation, hoping for a lifeline before next week's acquisition announcement was made public. I felt no satisfaction watching them unravel, but I did feel clarity. For so long, I had walked with the weight of their disappointment shaped by their dismissal, silenced by their assumptions. Tonight, I walked taller. The truth is, I never needed their validation. What I needed was this moment for myself to know I had never been the problem, only the threat to their narrow vision of success. I turned away from the spectacle and looked toward the terrace doors again. My father was still out there facing the skyline, like it might offer answers I never could. I chose not to interrupt. Sometimes dignity is best served in silence. Let them rewrite their version of the past. Let them recast me in their new narrative of pride. I would not play along. I had no interest in fitting into the story they tried to erase me from. I was far too busy writing the one they could never touch. So,